I never thought a simple weekend away would turn into a full-blown federal incident. All thanks to our neighborhood's infamous HOA Karen. You know, the type always peering through her blinds. Always ready to lecture someone about grass height or recycling bins. But this time, she took it way too far. While I was out of town for just a couple of days, she decided my house looked suspicious. Maybe it was the blinds not being fully closed or the trash bins not being pulled in right away. Whatever it was, she crossed the line. Without warning, she walked right up to my property, past the gate and tried to peek inside. But what she didn't know was that my home is wired with a high-level alarm system. Not the usual kind that just texts your phone or calls a local station. This system is part of my defense contract work. When triggered, it doesn't just alert the local police. It sends a direct signal to a Pentagon monitored network. Yeah, that kind of serious. Within seconds, red lights started flashing, cameras activated, and an alert was dispatched to a restricted channel. While Karen was still fumbling with my backdoor handle, trying to check for safety, she had no clue what she'd just set into motion. All she knew was that sirens were going off and a loud voice over the speaker warned her to step away. Meanwhile, I got a call from a federal liaison asking if my home was under threat. My stomach dropped. I hadn't even had my coffee yet. Now here I was, dealing with a full-blown security protocol because someone's HOA obsession crossed into national security. But the real twist, that was still to come. Because what happened after the Pentagon got involved? Even Karen couldn't talk her way out of that. So here's the thing, my job isn't something I usually talk about around the neighborhood. Most folks assume I work in IT or security consulting, and I let them think that. But in reality, I work with a federal contractor handling sensitive communication systems. That's why my home setup includes a government-authorized security system linked directly to an encrypted alert network. It's not flashy or obvious from the outside, just another quiet house in a suburban HOA community. And that's what made Karen's little inspection all the more dangerous. Karen, of course, had no clue about any of this. She's always poking around where she doesn't belong, filming people's yards, sending passive-aggressive notes, filing complaints about mailbox paint colors. But this time she saw I wasn't home and decided to take initiative. According to the footage, she muttered something about needing to make sure everything was okay before she slipped around the side gate. No permission, no call, just straight-up trespassing. That's when she set off the silent perimeter alert, which triggered a full-sequence infrared scan, facial recognition, and eventually lockdown mode. The external siren and speaker were only the beginning. Inside, the system activated data protection protocols, which sent out an automatic escalation. That meant high-level clearance alerts going out to systems that are not designed for neighborhood drama. I couldn't believe it. One HOA busybody had just dragged my entire classified work environment into a federal alert zone. And here's the craziest part, she still didn't leave. Even with sirens blaring and lights flashing, she stood there arguing with the speaker system, saying she had authority as part of the HOA board. Meanwhile, I'm 500 miles away, getting grilled by someone from the Department of Defense, trying to explain how my nosy neighbor accidentally triggered a secure network and may have just violated several protocols. And that was just the beginning. Back in the neighborhood, the situation was getting worse by the minute. A federal response vehicle had already been dispatched, but they kept it discreet and marked quiet, just how they handle civilian locations tied to sensitive systems. Karen, meanwhile, was pacing my backyard like she owned the place, completely unaware she was being watched and recorded from 7 different angles. The system's AI flagged her behavior as increasingly erratic, which only escalated the alert level. I was on the phone with 2 different government departments at once, trying to calm things down, but the protocol was already in motion. The HOA board started getting involved too, but not in a helpful way. I found out through my neighbor Sam that Karen had sent a mass email claiming there was a potential threat at my property, warning people to stay vigilant. She even attached a blurry photo of my security camera panel, which she must have snapped while trespassing. Now, people in the neighborhood were spooked, whispering rumors about me being some kind of secret agent or off-the-books government operator. All of this from one woman who couldn't leave a locked gate alone. Meanwhile, Karen had no idea she was being tracked in real time by defense analysts trying to determine if she was a real threat or just a very nosy civilian. My wife, who was the only person on my emergency clearance list, was on her way back to the house, being escorted by a plainclothes agent. She was calm but furious. We'd warned Karen before to respect boundaries. And now her actions weren't just annoying, they could end careers to make things more complicated. I got a call from someone higher up. They needed to confirm every person who had ever visited my home in the past 6 months. Background checks were initiated. Karen's name was flagged. That's when things took an even darker turn. As soon as Karen's name got flagged, everything shifted. What was originally treated as a neighborhood trespass incident suddenly got classified under a different protocol. The system had auto-sent her facial recognition data up the chain. And while she wasn't on any criminal database, something triggered further review. I wasn't told the exact reason, but the tone of the agents changed instantly. They asked more questions about her behavior, her access to the neighborhood, even whether she had reason to be targeting my property specifically. Now I was being told to keep my phone on and expect a follow-up debrief. Meanwhile, my wife arrived at the house just as the federal vehicle pulled up down the street, unmarked but unmistakable to anyone paying attention. Karen, still lingering in my yard, spotted them and started yelling that she was doing her civic duty. She demanded to know why strangers were showing up and started filming them, claiming she'd call the local police if they didn't leave. She had no clue who she was threatening. One of the agents calmly approached her and simply asked her to step aside while he verified her identity. That's when her whole energy shifted. She wasn't in control anymore, and she could feel it inside. The house was still on lockdown. Every sensor and camera tracking movement. My wife used her clearance code to override the system, but even that had to be double confirmed through a separate encrypted call. Karen stood frozen on the porch, watching the door unlock, clearly realizing for the first time that this wasn't some high-end home security gimmick. She had wandered into something way above her head. Neighbors started gathering from a distance. Watching the scene unfold, whispers traveled fast. Phones were out, but no one really understood what they were witnessing. Karen looked pale, still clutching her phone like it would protect her from what was coming next. And just then, one of the agents stepped aside to take a call. His face changed. He turned back toward my wife with one line that made everything stop cold. We found something. The agent's words, "We found something," hit like a punch to the gut. My wife gave him a sharp look, then glanced back at Karen, who was now frozen on the steps, her expression finally showing something close to fear. The agent motioned her inside and lowered his voice. I couldn't hear what was being said, but within seconds, she stepped back out, phone to her ear, and called me directly. They found encrypted data packets trying to ping your system from inside the neighborhood, she said quietly. Multiple attempts, and not just today. That stopped me cold. I'd always assumed any digital breach attempt would come from some faceless hacker, a world away from someone down the street. The agent confirmed it wasn't a coincidence. The alert that flagged Karen's name wasn't only from trespassing. It connected her home IP address to multiple failed access attempts on my classified terminal. Someone had been probing the system over Wi-Fi, and it looked like the origin point was a residence barely 4 houses down Karen's. Now everything started clicking. The questions, the hovering, the strange concern about my property. And even that time, she asked a neighbor if I worked with satellites or military stuff. At the time, we all brushed it off as typical Karen paranoia. But now, with active signals traced to her home network, the situation went from annoying to dangerous. Still, there was one more wrinkle. The agent wasn't fully convinced Karen knew what she was involved in. They suspected someone else had piggybacked onto her network, possibly through one of her many smart devices. Maybe a third party with technical skills, maybe someone close to her. But whoever it was, they were trying to breach something that was never meant to be accessed. And now, thanks to Karen's little field trip into my yard, we had physical evidence and a clear trail to follow. But just as the agents prepared to issue a warrant to trace the rest of her devices, Karen's Wi-Fi suddenly went dark. Everything in her house disconnected at once. Someone had wiped it remotely. And that changed everything. As soon as Karen's Wi-Fi cut out, the entire situation kicked into overdrive. The agents on site exchanged quick glances and immediately called in a digital forensics team. It wasn't just about a nosy neighbor anymore. This had escalated into a live security breach with someone actively trying to erase their tracks. Karen, still trying to make sense of what was happening, insisted she had no idea anyone was using her network. But the agents weren't buying it, not yet, at least. Within the hour, a mobile tech unit arrived. They swept Karen's home with specialized scanners and, to everyone's shock, discovered a hidden router tucked inside an old decorative cabinet in her garage. It had been running on a parallel signal, completely separate from her main Wi-Fi network. According to the lead tech, it looked like someone had installed it months ago, clever enough to stay hidden, but powerful enough to mask outbound signals under her IP address. Karen broke down in real time, confused and angry, demanding to know who could have done that. And that's when the real twist came. Her nephew, apparently, her college-aged nephew, had been staying with her over the summer and spent hours locked in the garage under the pretense of studying. Karen always bragged that he was some sort of tech genius, built his own computers, hacked phones, stuff like that. But what she didn't know was that he had quietly piggybacked off her address to gain access to high-level systems in the area, including mine. It wasn't about spying on me personally. He was trying to find holes in federal contractor networks for clout in online forums. But when he realized the system he was poking at was linked to national defense, he panicked and tried to cover his tracks. The agents found fragments of deleted code, message logs, and encryption tools, all tied back to his profile. Karen, caught in the middle, went from arrogant to shattered. The feds told her she wouldn't be charged, but she would be questioned further. And as for her nephew, he was picked up quietly at the airport, trying to leave the state. But just when I thought it was over, I got one final alert on my secure line. Someone else had accessed the same defense network. Only this time, it didn't come from my neighborhood. It came from overseas. The overseas alert changed everything. What started with a nosy HOA neighbor trespassing on my lawn had now led to an active international investigation. Turns out, the data Karen's nephew tried to access had already been flagged by a cybercrime unit watching for leaks and foreign probing. His attempt accidentally triggered a dormant trap built into the system, one that traced connections globally. The final breach pinged from a remote IP in Eastern Europe, and federal cybersecurity teams were already following that lead. Karen, to her credit, cooperated fully once everything came to light. She gave up access to all her home devices, emails, and even handed over her nephew's old flash drives. She wasn't charged, though she was warned sternly to never interfere with someone's property again, especially one linked to federal work. Let's just say her reign as HOA queen came to an abrupt end. People in the neighborhood started keeping their distance, not out of fear, but embarrassment. No one wanted to be the next to help Karen with her community patrols. My wife and I upgraded our system again, adding additional countermeasures and relocating sensitive hardware off-site. I also had to sit through several intense briefings, but thankfully, my clearance remained intact. The agents assured me I had done everything right. And as for Karen's nephew, well, he's now cooperating with authorities and facing serious consequences. I'm told he's lucky it didn't go worse in the end. This whole incident reminded me just how thin the line is between everyday life and the hidden systems operating behind the scenes. Sometimes, the biggest threats don't come from obvious enemies, but from someone walking their dog past your gate. So, if you've got a smart home and a nosy neighbor, keep your security tight, and maybe think twice before ignoring that perimeter alert notification.